Ready, sir. Technology is working okay? All good? Okay. So we'll start the meeting. The time is 5:31. We're a minute behind, so catch up. Thank you all for coming in person. We were having a little issue with getting a quorum, but I believe we have a quorum, right? Yes, we have a quorum. That's good. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We'll start with a roll call.
Atherton? Belmont?
Present.
Brisbane? Burlingame? Palma? Daly City?
Daly City, present.
Palo Alto?
Lisa Gaucher here.
Foster City? Half Moon Bay?
Deborah Penrose.
Hillsborough? Menlo Park? Millbrae? Pacifica? Portola Valley?
Present.
Redwood City?
Kaya Aiken for Redwood City.
San Bruno?
Rico Medina.
San Carlos?
John Dugan here.
San Mateo?
Robert Newsom.
South San Francisco?
Eddie Flores.
Woodside? And County of San Mateo.
Here. Thank you for that. We do have a quorum, just to verify. I've been asked to read the following notes on our technology here. This is a hybrid meeting. It's also taking place on Zoom. The laptop on the table in front will be your camera for the meeting. Please adjust the screen to provide a better camera angle. And remember, these microphones are very, very sensitive and will pick up conversation. Audio from the Zoom is being fed by microphones in the ceiling, as I just mentioned. Please do not adjust any Zoom settings or unmute your computer. This will result in audio feedback. Thank you. And we will be spotlighting council members when they are speaking. When making a comment, please say your jurisdiction, followed by a brief pause to allow staff to spotlight you. And if you motion or second, please say your jurisdiction. And hopefully the technology will keep working, but if it goes out, we'll pause for a moment and try to correct things and come back to it. So thank you for your indulgence and all of that. And following roll call, we'll ask for public comment. Is there any public comment?
No public comments.
Okay, there's no public comment, so we'll move on. Action to set the agenda and to approve.
Acting Supervisor, I believe we have one public comment on Zoom.
Okay. Christina. Are you?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you,
welcome to-
Supervisor Slocum. This is Christina. I'm not sure if you could hear me.
Can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm a resident of El Granada on the coast side near Half Moon Bay, and I'm calling in support of the CRISP strategic plan. This past winter, it was very apparent of the infrastructure weaknesses we have on the coast side, especially on 92 with the mudslides and the sinkhole and electricity outages. But most importantly, we don't have an urgent care on the coast side. Thankfully, we didn't have people who needed, if we did, I'm unfamiliar with it, and I'm sure we did, but we didn't have a huge number of residents needing medical care because we don't have a facility that provides urgent care here. And so I'm really in support of the strategic plan. I think it's overdue, and I'm really hoping that your committee will approve it. And I want to thank you for the time to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Looks like Carlisle Ann Young. Are you here?
Thanks. Took me a while to find the unmute. Okay. I will wait till that agenda item, but I am in support of the CRISP thing too. But what I wanted to know is two things. The Board of Supervisors after the CZU lightning strike fire eventually it gave us a time period when people on the coast side or unincorporated San Mateo County could remove trees on private property without having to go through the expense of taking out a building permit or, tree removal permit. And I guess that's set to expire June 30th. And I've mentioned it a few times at the Board of Supervisors, if they should please try to extend that, because in the storms, there were a lot more trees that blew down. Secondly, I just hope that you will, when you spend your $200,000 to hire somebody for the CRISP program, I hope you'll get someone who actually lives on the coast side to be the consultant. Because I've seen reports that have been written from Redwood City by somebody who's occupying a desk, and it really doesn't help. I mean, especially Connect the Coast Side, they put in so many things that just were not important to us, but they didn't know because they don't live here. So that would be one thing. I just ask if you will see if you can extend the tree permit ordinance, shall I say, waiver, and also get the last thing is I wanted to find out if I saw in January you guys had you're working on a countywide emergency evacuation plan. I want to know if you're going to do any follow-up with the coast side, because I haven't seen anything happening on that. So it'd be great. You could do it through MCC if you want. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Any other public speakers on Zoom? Nope. No other public speakers. So we'll move on, but before we do, I just wanted to thank Don Matei for the coffee and the great food back there. I hope you all have had a chance to get a little something. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Moving on, if it's okay, we'll have an action to set the agenda and to approve any consent agenda items. And number one under this item is approve the minutes of the May 4th, 2023 Emergency Services Council meeting. Is there a motion?
Dan Bruno, move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Catherine Bay, second.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded. Can we just do without objection?
We can ask for a vote and then any opposed and any abstentions.
But we don't have to do roll call?
No.
Okay. Anybody opposed? Motion passes then for item number one. Item number two, approve the 23-25 Emergency Services Joint Powers Authority budget. We may want to have some conversation on this from members, but not sure. So, open up the floor. So, comments or questions? Okay, without objection, we'll move to pass this. I don't hear any objections. So item number two is passed. Item number three, approve the 23-24 Emergency Services Council and Finance Committee meeting schedules. Shouldn't be much controversy there. Anybody opposed? Okay, carries. Item four, approve setting JPA budgetary reserves minimum of $500,000 and a maximum of $1.5 million. Any objection on the reserves? Okay. Past that, item number four. Now we'll move on to the regular agenda. And item five is approve an allocation of $200,000 in the JPA budgetary reserves for a coastside resilient infrastructure strategic plan, aka CRISP. And I know San Mateo County Supervisor from the 3rd District, Ray Mueller, is here, and he is going to tell us all about the CRISP. Take it away, Supervisor.
Thank you, Supervisor Slocum, and I'd like to thank the Finance Committee for moving this project forward to you all for your consideration, and Supervisor Slocum, and who was advocate in allowing me to bring this to committee, and to Adam and his staff, to Don for getting this ready for you all. This is a really, I can't emphasize how excited I am to talk with you about this project. So in the past year, in the winter months, we saw a storm system that came through and really battered the coast. And what it did was it highlighted for us how vulnerable the coast is right now, and has been for a number of years, basically because the infrastructure that is in place was already non-redundant, was already in severe need of upgrade, but now due to the impacts of climate change, it literally is failing, and it's failing in a manner that is exposing lifelines to failure. And that is something that that puts the public health of the coast at risk. And we saw that happen continuously through this last storm system. We saw that happen in the area of transportation, when we saw roads start to go out, culverts blocked, roads start to crumble, potholes formed. And what that did was it not only isolated the coast from goods being able to come into the coast, but it actually created a terrible situation where people would not be able to get at different times to access those routes for emergency medical care. And this was the first of what we will see in a continuing impact of monsoon type, what experts tell us will be monsoon type winters. For those of you who don't know, what they're telling us about climate change is we will see monsoon winters where basically we will have very intense rains for short periods of time. They're going to get worse, and then we're going to have very long, pronounced dry seasons following. So what we saw this last year, we already see an El Nino forming for next year, and we're going to see those impacts accumulate over time. So to go ahead and look at all of those critical lifelines and start to improve those now is of the utmost importance for what's coming. We see that in the area of transportation, what I shared. We see that in the area of health, what we just talked about. The coast can become isolated, so people need to be able to access health care. We see that with respect to sewer. We actually had a sewer plant that was very close to failing on the coast because of what was taking place with respect to tidal flow coming in, and also what was taking place with respect to creeks coming out. We saw that sewer plant almost failure. It would have been a catastrophic public health risk if that had occurred. We see that with respect to not just what's happening to access routes into the 92, but then also on the 84, but we see that along Highway 1. We see that within the different neighborhoods from transit. If you go through, and we provided you a report, energy and power grids, people went without power not days, but weeks on the coast. We saw that with telecommunication networks, which we're trying to go ahead and address. We already have a project to address that now. But we saw one line in La Honda Cut that removed telecommunication access to the entire coast while it was out. And while we're going ahead and building redundancy right now with Comcast and with Caltrans to eliminate that one specific problem, what we see on the coast happen is because there are so many trees that if one tree goes down, that will take out an entire section for a very long period of time. And if there are successive trees that go down, we see that problem with power go ahead and extend out. So what we really need to start looking at is a move towards sort of redundant power grids throughout the coast as we look at this. And so what we're proposing doing is actually looking at the coast. And this is what I realized real quickly when I became supervisor on the coast, is that you have a couple of cities, and then you have a lot of different districts. And on top of that, layered on top of it, you have the Coastal Commission. You have the RCD. You have one shoreline. And so you have a lot of different infrastructure projects taking place all at once, but there isn't one place that I can go and look at and see all of them. That makes it very difficult as a supervisor to know which one is most important in terms of prioritization, and how do I go and talk with my legislators, both at the federal and state level, about which one to move forward first. How does the county rank them? So what we're talking about doing is taking all of those known infrastructure projects from all of the different districts, including the fire districts, putting them into one grid, ranking those projects so that we can start and identifying what funding exists, where the funding gaps are, and then we can go ahead, start to go out and find the funding available to knock them out in order of succession. So I know all of you are used to it, and I'm used to it too. Every year around budget time, we get the call from the state legislator saying what project needs to move forward. Drives me crazy. Now I will be able to say, this is the project that needs to move forward. This is the one next in the list. And we can go ahead and figure out which ones are reliant upon the next. There's also what the CRISP will also allow us to do is to identify the holes. When you have so many different districts and you have so many different people doing work, it's hard to know what is not being addressed. And by going ahead and putting this all into an Esri type solution that has the mapping take place, we'll be able to go ahead and say this area no one's taking responsibility for, and it's a problem. So by doing that lifeline assessment and looking at the whole coast, we're going to go ahead and be able to identify our problem areas. And that really goes into the secondary portion of the CRISP, where we go ahead and we look at vulnerable populations and seniors and different groups who we need to go ahead and make sure are being accounted for in the development of this analysis. So I don't want to talk forever on this. I provided you all with a pretty lengthy document to look through. But I'm happy to answer questions, and I know there's lots of public comment. And one of the things that I think is going to be really exciting about doing this is that in building the CRISP, you get to bring in the expertise of all of our local districts who are looking at these issues. Some of those experts are sitting behind me. We get to bring into all of that community input, and we get to actually build this document. And what I really want about the CRISP to be is actually built in a GIS platform so that it is dynamic. So it is not a document that once we're done goes and sits on a shelf, but it's a document that stays dynamic over time, and we can actually build within that GIS platform so that we can see dynamically what the situation is with respect to all of that infrastructure as time progresses. So with that, I'll go ahead and open it up for any questions.
Thank you. It looks like we have 3 hands raised on Zoom. Harvey, Greg, and Sue, and then we actually have 4, Carlisle and Young. But let's go back and get Harvey first. Harvey? On mute.
I serve on the Half Moon Bay City Council, but I'm speaking as a private citizen. I think Supervisor Mueller's CRISP is an incredibly good idea, a long time coming. The coast is easily isolated, and as we saw with the recent storms, that can lead to real health and safety problems. So I think a rational approach where all the priorities for the infrastructure that we need that Supervisor Mueller is advocating for is excellent. I'd just like to put in a brief plug for a couple of items that I think are really important. During the recent storms, there were people who could not get over the hill for medical appointments, and there was lots of problems because of that. So I think that if we can work towards getting an urgent care facility on the coast, that would help very much towards public health and safety. And there are lots of ways of doing it, and I think we need to explore all of them. Then the other infrastructure item that particularly is important to me, it has to do with broadband infrastructure, communications. That's really a health and safety problem. If you can't reach 911, if you can't reach community services, that can lead to real problems. So those are a couple of the items that I think are very important to explore. But in general, I think this whole CRISP idea is wonderful. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Harvey. Move on to Greg. Are you with us, Greg?
There you go. I'm Greg Diegas. I'm the chair of the Mid-Coast Community Council, technically speaking as an individual, but you can bet your bottom dollar that a ton of people over here agree with what I'm about to say. I would like to talk about 3.5 things that are not in this proposal, even though I support it wholeheartedly. Evacuation is the half thing. It's mentioned in passing, but it's critical that this study come up with solutions to the evacuation issues. And that leads to the second thing, which was not mentioned in the report, which is stormwater. Highway 1 was so flooded at the airport, cars couldn't get down. I almost lost my car getting to the sewer plant to view the disaster. The Highway 1 was also halfway blocked by mudslides south of Carlos Street and higher streets in Montera. The cumulative impact of building impermeable surfaces over the prior decades has shown we have inadequate drainage throughout the region, cutting off power and roads with falling trees and flooding. The sewer plant, as Ray mentioned, and its remote pump stations had repeated problems and millions of dollars in damage. And we cannot find a stormwater master plan for our region. So we would kind of like that to be included in the deliverables subsequent to this study. Wildfires and other risks to our infrastructure. I'm aware of no regional wildfire management plan for our area. It also threatens the infrastructure. We had a county wildfire coordinator hired on a grant by Supervisor Horsley, who evaporated, as far as I can tell, without any progress made after 3 months. There was a small study done in El Granada using simulation on a fragmentary basis to assess the priority areas near El Granada Quarry Park, but it didn't include any dollar figures on costs and damages, nor did it model the impact on structures. The firm that did that analysis has a product used in the entirety of Santa Barbara County and a county in Colorado as a way of assessing the return on investment of wildfire investments. How much do you put into mitigation, of what type? What are the results in loss or less loss or more loss, depending on how you handle it? And finally, fiscal sustainability. For example, stormwater infrastructure is not funded in the county as far as we can see. Permitting is, but there's no impact fee we can find for new joiners proportional to their pro rata share of the infrastructure in stormwater that is required. Any analysis of infrastructure has to include the perpetual funding to keep that infrastructure functional. Those are my 3.5 comments on things that I found were largely missing. My request is please include a representative of the Mid-Coast Community Council in the team working on the CRISP analysis in this report. Some of you will have seen we've already done a 40-page report on the telecommunications vulnerabilities, and we've worked with Half Moon Bay and Harvey to try and get started on a community fiber network. A stormwater report is coming out, followed by a wildfire report. So we will have a lot to contribute. Thank you.
We'll move on to Sue. Are you with us, Sue, from Pacifica?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to speak, Supervisor. I am wanting to support this project. I think it's an important investment for the entire coast side. And one of the things that I think it brings in is an opportunity for all of the coastal communities to work together and to collaborate. One of the things we know is that, as previous speakers alluded to, we are isolated on the coast. And in the event of a significant disaster, we will need to work with each other, and having the priorities established will enable us to do that in the most efficient way. I would look forward to Pacifica being able to contribute what we have already done in terms of our own stormwater management studies. And we've done some work on adaptation, but there's a lot more to be done. I think a big priority for me, in addition to the health issues that were mentioned and the opportunity for some sort of urgent care that would address the needs on the coast, is also to focus on the transportation infrastructure, because we really have 2 ways in and out of Pacifica, and well, 3 really, if you count Sharp Park Road. But all of the communities along the coast are kind of in the same situation with our Highway 1 access. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for joining us. Call on Carlisle and Young. You there, Carlisle?
I hit the
Hello.
unmute microphone there. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, good. My deepest thanks to Ray. He took office in January and right away had a storm and a mass shooting. So his first month, he was really busy, but it's still because he had to go over to the coast for a lot of those issues. He knows what we face. And I know that over time, whoever does the report will be mentioning the fact that we really need some community centers and evacuation centers because, from Pescadero to Montera, there's nothing. And okay, there's two cities, Pacifica and Half Moon Bay, but just because they have indoor plumbing doesn't mean we should be told to go use theirs. We really are going to need to have more than just a local gymnasium or something to go to. And as far as I can tell, we don't have anything like that. No emergency evacuation shelter, and that, God forbid, includes if visitors are going to be cramming in there too. During the CZU fires, Pescadero had to go to Half Moon Bay and use their high school gym. We need our own center. So one thing Sheriff Albin posted on Nextdoor this week was just how frustrated she was of not hearing about the one-way traffic control on 92. So I think it was Caltrans decided to do some work, or PG&E. They didn't notify anyone. And people complain a lot about SMC alert, but we don't get the notifications of the traffic problems when there are some. So I noticed I just got a card in the mail for the new Samtrans Plus for, transportation for seniors or anybody, and it doesn't even go to Montera. So when is the first meeting? That's what I want to know. I know you have to hire somebody, but do you have a schedule in mind for when your first meeting will be?
Thank you, Carlisle.
Thank you.
Move on to the next speaker. Looks like Lisa from Pacifica. Are you there, Lisa?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, we can hear you.
Great, thank you, and good evening, council. My name is Lisa Peterson, and I am a resident and also the Public Works Director of the City of Pacifica, and I'm here to speak in support of the CRISP plan. I feel development of the CRISP plan is really critical for vulnerable communities on the coast like Pacifica. We are really feeling the impact of climate change. Obviously, we also have the mountains on the one side. We get a lot of stormwater running down there, as was talked about. Additionally, the coast is crashing into us. We're losing our coastal cliffs, and these impacts were really highlighted during this past winter's 13 atmospheric rivers that caused significant impacts in both Pacifica and other coastal communities. And of course, also millions of dollars in damages that we're all suffering and needing to address. So all of the plan components, such as providing the risk assessment, infrastructure evaluation, evaluating transportation networks, the telecommunication, and healthcare, these are things that are really needed, and to do the prioritization. This study is a great start to building in resiliency to our coastal community. And this is something that is absolutely necessary for the future of the coast. And as you know, as the Public Works Director, I'm seeing this firsthand. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. I think the last hand that I see is Mr. Big Stick.
Thank you, Supervisor Slocum. Thank you, Council, for hearing me. Thank you, Supervisor Mueller, for bringing this forward. It's really kind of an amazing concept from my perspective to finally have this laid before us. As a coastal community, and I am the mayor of Pacifica, every time we have an infrastructure project, it's usually born from, say, something like an erosion that happens over time, and lo and behold, we have a project that we have to address. And then another project creeps up, and having a handful of these projects, then the question is, well, how are we going to figure out how to interconnect these and make sure that we're, say, addressing the natural adaptation strategies that we need between the hardening strategies that we need. And so before you know it, just trying to address one city's coastline becomes a major lift. And then when we have something like the storms that took place this winter, and it highlights the needs that are in some ways so much greater south of the tunnel than what we're chewing on Pacifica, it really obviates the need to really assess the entirety of our coastline and figure out what strategies we can implement, and as the supervisor said, the proper timeline for rolling out those strategies. As a final note, as I'm hearing urgent care, as somebody who generally is thinking in terms of the immediacy of armoring strategies needed, and then, you know, sometimes secondarily about how we can make sure that we keep our beaches complete as we armor simultaneously, urgent care obviates the need for having a truly holistic approach. And what I really feel strongly about why I feel this is amazing is it brings that holistic approach. And I'm so grateful for Supervisor Mueller for bringing this holistic approach to the front. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there other comments that I might not see here? One more?
One comment from Ann.
Okay. Who is that?
And
Ann, okay. Ann?
Hi. Hi, thank you so much. I am sorry about that. I was having a little trouble on meeting. I also just wanted to give my full support for this. And I just also want to thank Supervisor Mueller for putting this forward. It's so desperately needed, as you've heard from everyone. And I just agree with all the comments made prior to this. And just again, want to thank you for bringing this to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Is that it now? Yes, Supervisor.
I do want to note that there is a public comment from Mark Steckbart, Pacifica. Mr. Steckbart's unable to attend tonight, but there's a copy of his comment that's been made available to all of you.
Yeah, I'm going to get to San Carlos in just a second, but I wanted to throw it open to anybody in the audience that might want to make a public comment on this item. Looks like
Matthew Chittister.
Looks like the city manager wants to.
I won't take too much of your time. I think you've seen we have really great thought partners on the coast. As a native son of the Mid-Coast and now working for the city of Half Moon Bay, I'm really, really appreciative of the work that the supervisor's done and just his short tenure with us so far. And I think this is a great example of the work that's happening. There's a lot of great collaboration happening on the coast right now, and you know, we really have had to pull together, and this we'll just carry that forward. One thing that I think is important to mention is, though, you know, there's a lot of really great stuff on the coast. We've got our beaches, we've got great agriculture. It's a great tourism area for the county. We're also home to some very, very vulnerable populations. We have a lot of wealth disparity on the coast, and I think that this plan will ensure that those that cannot take care of themselves, cannot prepare themselves for whether it's natural disasters or, you know, as simple as having online access for their children during a pandemic. And so I'm really grateful for this plan and the way it addresses it. It should address everyone on the coast, especially really vulnerable members of our community. So thank you, Ray, and thank you all for considering this.
Thank you, Mr. Chittister. Appreciate that. Anybody else in the audience that would like to comment on Chris? Okay, San Carlos?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and yeah, thank you, Supervisor Mueller. Aware of the large impacts out on the coast, so I'm supportive of this exercise. But given the large geography involved and the many points of infrastructure that will have to be looked at, and a strategic plan being ambitious, is $200,000, is that an adequate budget for this exercise?
It gets us started. I talked with Adam about it. So it allows us to get, I mean, the first task is going to be getting all of those projects put into an Esri platform and figuring out what's there, and then there's community outreach. But I think it'll get us. I think it gets us out where we need to be going. Yes.
Okay. And then will this likely be reoccurring expense for this council, or?
No, I don't anticipate coming back to this council. So I realize this money is coming from reserves, and I appreciate the kickstart from the council to get us going. So, but no, I don't expect we'll be coming back to the council.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other? Yes, Deborah?
Yeah, thank you, Ray. This is long time coming. Every branch of government now is talking about equity, and equity has become the keyword, the popular word, but it really hits home in Half Moon Bay and on the coast. We definitely have a population that suffers from being unequally treated. And this will be a start. It's not going to be a project that makes immediate improvement, but it does give us, as Tigger said, a holistic approach. And that means everything is going to be included and we can prioritize. Instead of being hit and miss and waiting for a disaster to come and throwing money at it and fixing a road here or a bridge there, this gives us a basis for really looking at what we need to do. And it also will project for us in the future the amount of energy and money and time that we have to spend on dealing with these projects. I think that the county as a whole could use something like this, but I certainly appreciate the fact that you're doing it for the coast. So I'm totally in favor of CRISP.
Thank you. Redwood City, then East Palo Alto.
Thank you. I also think it's a fantastic idea to be strategic and to plan instead of, as my colleague has said, instead of putting out fires, to plan ahead. I just have a question. It's on page 1 of the staff report. It's the last sentence. And it has to do with that I guess our committee has. It says DEM will cross-reference the proposed study with the all-hazard evacuation plan to ensure that both studies are not at cross purposes or not duplicating. And so I just wanted to explore, do we already have a study going on? Are we duplicating? I just wanted to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I don't think we're duplicating, but let me call on Don to talk about evacuation plans.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor. We do have an all-hazard evacuation plan that's in the works. Actually, the contract's going to be awarded shortly, and that's about $348,000. And we're looking at roadways similar that we've gotten comments of, but looking at it from a structural standpoint. What the supervisor is talking about is looking at a lot of infrastructure, the radio systems we have and stuff like that, which really needs to be covered, because we did have an incident during this storm that we almost lost the radios up in North Peak. But they will be cross-checked to make sure they don't, it's in our contract in number 9 that we have for the RFP that talks about any future plans have to be cross-referenced so nobody's studying the same thing.
But we can integrate.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering if we should stop that RFP and then just have a bigger RFP that does it all.
Go ahead. I think that, you know, something, we can get it going and we can look at it, because in a way they're the same, in a way they're different though. Because we're looking at evacuations, roadways, those kind of things, the how to get to places, right? Because we know it's very, very temperamental up on in the coast, even on our side. I mean, we looked at Hillsborough, we looked at Millbrae, we looked at Redwood City to see faster ways for evacuation purposes. They touch, but they don't touch. And I think there needs to be a dual study on those. If we decide somewhere along the line with that, how I envision it would be like, there's a master plan, an annex to the plan and stuff like that, but they should be commingled eventually. But they're really on 2 different topics.
Supervisor, do you want to?
Yeah, and they'd be integrated. So, I mean, we'd look at what was, and I really don't want to do, I'd rather keep them separate because the money's already allocated to that and they're doing the work, and I don't want to go ask for other money.
Yeah.
But but when you, basically, because that good work is being done right now and it's currently being integrated in the plan, and then what we could do is look at that work and figure out what infrastructure it touches that needs to then be addressed in the CRISP. And then also, and any work that based on that would come out, that the CRISP would need, including if you identify there needs to be an evacuation center, the CRISP is going to say, this plan says there needs to be an evacuation center here. CRISP was going to say, okay, that matches what the CRISP is saying. How are we going to fund the evacuation center, and where does that fall in line in the ranking of the rest of the infrastructure that we have to build? So, but I think it's great the way it is.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. East Palo Alto.
Thank you, Supervisor. I am definitely in support of this initiative. I'm just thinking about timing, because I don't know I heard an El Nino for the upcoming season. So what's the timing for the RFP and actually see work?
From our side, as soon as we get the contract going, we have to meet with the contractor, I put an estimate of 1.5 to 2 years if they're really gonna study and see what's going on, because if we're looking at this from a geological sense or, an earthquake, it's gonna take time for them to look at this information and put it together. Could be faster too, could be much faster.
And we're looking to get, develop an RFP in a way that's inclusive.
Yes.
Of the voices, some of the which you heard, today. We won't take too long, 90 to 120 days to get somebody on board, I think.
Yeah.
And then the work will commence, and it's long-term type work.
So as everybody knows, I'm impatient when it comes to these projects.
Yeah.
And so we have moved, like we got the connectivity project to go through the tunnel and moved that timeline up by 4 years through California Department of Technology, and everyone's moving heaven and earth to get that done by next winter because of what we're looking at. And we are right now trying to prioritize urgent needs like that, for what would be the acute circumstance. All of these needs are important, and they're all sitting out there right now. But this project in large part is necessary. I'm very candid. It's selfish for me to know, how do I spend my time advocating for which project first? What is going to move the needle the most to help the coast? And so some of these projects are going to take a long time to get through. Government moves slow, leaves a big wake.
Thank you.
Mr. Medina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Supervisor Mueller, thank you for bringing this forward. And as you entered into office, obviously it was not a honeymoon period, shall we say. And I think you know firsthand, and from my chief, or San Bruno's chief, for where he lives, I hear some of these more personal stories and understand the effect of truly what happens to the coast. And I think, as my colleague from Redwood City, the RFP for the evacuation is already going forward, which is being funded through the reserves. And we had discussed as a collective that the reserves were to be used when we went over a limit in order to do projects like this, in order to help one another. And though this, I think Ray wants to have it particularly on the coast, which is really the necessary situation that we have, so keeping them separate makes sense. And I can tell you were a little impatient when it comes to this, because I saw your face when Don said how long. So
I know.
I'm sure between Don and Adam, they can figure it out to expedite it somehow faster than that. But I do think it's important, and I appreciate you bringing it up, and I appreciate Warren, the chair, also bringing this forward to the finance. And I am in support of this and appreciate your efforts and your devotion to what you're doing for your district.
Thank you. And so everyone knows, Rico's referring to Ari DeLay, who's the fire chief in San Bruno, but he's also the volunteer fire chief La Honda. I learn from him every time I'm with him. Incredible asset to community.
Other comments over here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ray, Supervisor Mueller, I think there's something that must be said about this plan in relation to the language and the cultural accessibility and sensitivity. I really want to call that out, because that really stood out for me in every aspect. In fact, this is almost a model of what plans should incorporate. This is intentional, and I really appreciate it, not only specifically to the language and the cultural sensitivity, but also identifying those demographics, for example, senior groups that really need to be at the table. And you are essentially creating a path here for even cultural leaders to be able to provide their feedback. And I know you're very hands-on as well, and I appreciate that, because it starts with listening, as I've seen you do. So this also resonates very, very strongly, and it reads as very successful too.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Over here, yes.
I also want to say thank you, and being from Pacifica, of course, I'm in support. We often get left out. People use us and almost abuse us because they come, they leave, and they forget that we need help too. So thank you very much, and I look forward to everybody working together to be collaborative in this, and we will.
It's going to be fun.
Other comments? Yes, Mr.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Supervisor Mueller. When reading this, I say to myself, I did not know. This has brought about an awareness as to the issues about coastal cities. In addition, the great resource we have in our coastal cities. And even to this very day, 54 years ago, I was traumatized because somebody made mention going over the hill. And it was then that my vehicle broke down, and I said, how am I going to get back over that hill? So what I did is I tied one of my shoelaces to the accelerator pedal on my Volkswagen and just pulled the wire. Even today, every time I go down there, I think back to that time and I say, wow, I'm glad I got a great running car. But when we talk about equity of other folks, the other folks who live in Pacifica, that's a concern that they have. If they want to come over the hill, they say, ooh, I have to make sure that my car is running to come over that hill, because there's only one way to come in north, not unless you go all the way around 92 and come up the long way. We need a study. We need something to be done. Now, I keep getting these packages in the mail from AT&T, and I've ignored them because I guess I've gotten spoiled. And it says upgrade to fiber free of charge. And when I see here your telecommunications network, and some folks are really having problems, it shouldn't be that way. So as one of my colleagues said, especially Mr. Flores, I'm looking at this as an equity aspect because I believe the coastline should be the same everywhere. So I think this was a long time coming, as Half Moon Bay has made mention, and this may serve as a model to provide a needs assessment should any other city want to do the same and look at their city as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Other comments?
Chair,
Yes.
just among the discussion, and you and I sit on the One Shoreline. So I was just wondering, would you be able to engage One Shoreline in terms of the risk assessment and be part of a stakeholder in terms of moving forward? I know that One Shoreline is moving toward the coastside in terms of looking for projects and things like that, so perhaps they will be able to lend the expertise in terms of.
Yeah, so what will happen is the consultant will reach out to One Shoreline, it'll reach out to RCD, it'll reach out to the Harbor District, it'll reach out to all of those agencies, say, what are your projects? Because right now, they all have different projects along that shoreline, and they're not harmonized. And so to take those all and get them into one spot and then have everyone talking about how do they harmonize all of those projects is going to be something that's going to be vitally important as we go to the Coastal Commission and then also go to Sacramento and ask for money. So and that's really, at the end of the day, what this comes down to is trying to get everybody on the same page so that we can make the most effective use of those resources, make the most effective ask for those resources.
Other comments? If not, just a reminder, we're on item 5, which is to approve an allocation of $200,000 in JPA budgetary reserves for Coastside Resilient Infrastructure Strategic Plan, AKA CRISP. And we appreciate Supervisor Mueller's time here tonight. Appreciate the reception that we got at the Finance Committee and here tonight. So would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Can we do roll call?
All in favor?
Yeah. Anybody object? Nobody. All in favor. So item 5 is approved.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Grab a cookie on your way out.
Save one for me.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, which is consideration of allocating $200,000 for the purchase of 2 Department of Emergency Management, Emergency Response vehicles. Director Matei.
Well, I'm kind of embarrassed following that. How do I ask for vehicles, right? But the reality is that we have a very old fleet. I mean, I can go through we have a 2008 Crown Victoria. All our cars were hand-me-downs from the sheriff's office. Always had a lot of mileage on them, but during the storm, we lost the vehicle because it kind of got drowned in the water. So we think that we need trucks right now. I'm pretty flexible on the type of trucks, the type of vehicles. I think to get an electric truck right now from Ford, it's a long wait. And I think there needs to be some further, testing of those kind of vehicles. So what we're looking at basically is gasoline type vehicles, trucks. We do have some very large trailers to pull. They're in the range of 10,000 pounds. They're shelter trailers that we move around quite a bit. I know that when David Cosgrave took our F-250, it's the only new vehicle we have, although it was bought in 2014 on a grant and some matching funds. He was down in Pescadero when it flooded, and he was able to get in, but he couldn't get out for a while. So we do go in some high water areas. We do respond to hazmat. We do respond to other incidents, fires and stuff like that. We're kind of different as far as Department of Emergency Management folks go. The vehicles are just a one-time ask from you folks, from the council. We will take care of all the fuel, maintenance, insurance, all that kind of stuff. So it's just a one-time thing for us to ask you for this funding. But what it also does for us, it starts a track that we can now start putting away money for the future, for future vehicles. Because the way the county does it, because we always had used vehicles, there was no way to start a funding path for them. So that's one of the things we want to do, start a funding path. And then sometime in September, we'll probably get to order 2 more trucks, and then that really puts a new department with better vehicles, newer vehicles, and the cost of these vehicles includes radios and stuff like that we would put in it. So that's why the cost is a little bit high. But right now, we go out for an RFP, request for proposal, to the normal commercial market. We're not looking for anything really fancy. We're looking at the base model. And it could be a Dodge, it could be a Chevy, it doesn't matter, but I just use Ford. Not because I have them, but I kind of like Fords, but, I know more about them. But the reality is this, right? We want something in that category, so that when we put somebody out there, they can go over the hill at night in a storm on Highway 84. Because I had somebody come back during that storm, when it was during the December, January, heavy storm. I didn't feel comfortable putting this in the consent side of it. I really wanted the opportunity for feedback, if you had any questions. So that's why I brought it out and put it into the agenda. I know that Adam and I had a conversation about this, and I felt the need to be here to be discussed because we're using your money.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item? No public comment. Members, any questions, comments? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director McKay, thank you again. I was part of the Finance Committee when this was first brought up. And my thought is always, and you even kind of looked at me when you said this particular point, and that's EV. Now, I do know that the Ford has the F-150.
Right.
And there's been quite a long wait period. Yep. And when I learned at the Finance Committee that San Mateo here does have the infrastructure to charge these vehicles. And I want to provide a reminder that the maintenance is much different for electric vehicles. I'm hoping that we have not given up for the future, because when I see a 2008 Crown Victoria, which I used to drive when I was in law enforcement, I definitely know what you mean, because those are some hard miles. It goes to one shift, and then when that shift gets off, the next shift takes it, and then the next shift takes it, and it's constantly going all the time. I remember when I used to drive, I'd say, oh, heck, I don't care. I'll just turn on the red lights and just step on it, and if it goes down, they'll fix it. So, definitely sorely needed. And I'm happy you brought this before the council to make a decision.
Thank you.
And I hope we won't give up on
No.
the adoption.
We even talked about, at one point, maybe looking at it, see what the state's doing, too. It's on the state sales thing, so we can do that.
Excellent. And Peninsula Clean Energy might be able to provide some.
That's a good point.
As well. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Half Moon Bay?
Yes, you said something about in a couple of months, we would be needing to ask for a couple of more vehicles.
No, that would be from the state bid. So the county goes out and bids on a state contract, but that could be, we don't know when we get those vehicles. And I want to start the process because we've already been, this is the first year of a new department, right? And so I'm trying to staff it up for the next person to come on, that everything's in place for them and not have to struggle with stuff to get new stuff for them. That person coming in here should be able to, should be shovel ready for them to take over. But in September, we can bid, we will go to bid with the county. On the county side, it doesn't cost anything for you folks. What we're doing, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Are we bidding on electric trucks?
Oh, not right now, it's too difficult to get them right now. I mean, there's a long waiting period for them. We
So
can.
even though this happens in September, we can't do a bidding until September, is that what you're saying?
No, what we're gonna do is, we're gonna go out for an RFP. We've done this before for vehicles to the commercial side, right? We're gonna spell out what we want, they'll go look for them for us, and we'll get them here quicker. That's the idea, is try to get this stuff going faster. When the state budget comes, when the state contract, which I believe we bid on them in September, then we can look for other things through the state of California. And so, it's just two different ways to look at this.
So we'll be buying 2 vehicles through ESC and then 2 vehicles through departmental funds.
And can we be looking at buying the 2 vehicles through the state as electric vehicles?
We explored this with our county office of sustainability, and the sheriff's actually doing a similar review. The feedback that we received from them was that it was going to be quite a long wait to get an electric vehicle, and for these sort of high water potential situations, emergency response situations, it hasn't quite been tested yet. The Office of Sustainability was a little bit worried about a situation where we got an electric vehicle and we're using it in the disaster response and it failed, that might not be overall great for sort of the reputation of these vehicles and whatnot. So we're probably gonna be slightly, maybe be second, right? Maybe let the state be first.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's limited range too, you know, because people forget, it's like, well, you know, you live on the coast. From here over to Pescadero and back, it's almost 80 miles, you know, when you look at the road structure, so. Yes. Go ahead.
So thank you. In a former life, when I worked for the federal government, I managed a fleet of vehicles somewhat like this.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to deal with emergencies, mostly flooding. But we had situations where our trucks and vehicles were out in the field for a week. They didn't get back to the shop for a week because they were tending to generators and pumps and, you know, all this emergency equipment. With it, you know, we all love the electric vehicles. I love electric vehicles. But with a traditional kind of vehicle, you can fuel it in the field. You can send a tanker truck out. You can send another truck with gas cans.
Yeah.
You can keep that vehicle going without it coming back to the shop for indefinitely. So as much as we all love electric vehicles, I think the state of the world today is such that a vehicle that you can fuel in the field is a better emergency response.
Makes total sense. Thank you.
Can I?
Sure.
So I am happy to hear my colleagues also talking about the electric vehicle, and I wouldn't second guess the expertise in this room and the subcommittee. So just a couple questions. So the F-150s, that's an electric truck?
No, they're both gas.
Okay,
Both
but you
vehicles,
said there's a waiting period for electric
Yes.
trucks? Tell me, could you just say a little bit about
So
that?
they're ordered and they're high level, you know, they're not like XL is like the basic model, which we would get. They're like in the Lariat and the higher level models, some of those, right? You can find some that are lower level, but they come with lower range too. The basic model come like, I think it's 290 miles or something like that. They're not where they need to be right now, you know? So the idea is, and I don't know if you can get one of those, and it's a long period to wait. That's just what they told us at the Office of Sustainability, told Adam. And just looking around for them, because I was asked to, there's not too many around. I think go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So I defer to your expertise on that. And I do like the idea of maybe we want to be second, not first in an emergency situation. But I'm with my colleagues in really wanting us to always be cognizant of the electric alternative, and it sounds like you are.
Yep, so what the idea is here is that we'll do the RFP, we'll come back in September and see if we can spend the money. That's what we're
Other comments?
I looked it up, and it said if you want an electric truck, hurry up and wait, because it'll be 24, 25 before you get an electric at 150. So,
I just wanted to add my 2 cents. Certainly trust your judgment on what truck to buy, but just would ask you to consider not buying the basic F-150 model. And think about more of a heavier duty, four-wheel drive, 250 powertrain, blah, blah, blah kind of vehicle. Anyway.
They're one and one, so.
What?
They're we like one big one and one kind of medium-sized one, so,
Like the Goldilocks plan, okay. So we're on item 6, and there's no more public comment, nobody in the audience that wants to speak on this. So this is an item to consider the allocation of $200,000 in reserves for the purchase of 2 departmental emergency response vehicles, and we're looking for a motion.
So Carlos moves.
Second.
Second.
Oh, very good, East Palo Alto.
Thank you very much.
Second in, any opposition? There being none, motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, moving on. Item 7. Presentation, San Mateo County Fire Readiness Group, and the very distinguished Jonathan Cox is here to share with us tonight.
Well, thank you. With that introduction, the bar's high. Good evening. My name is Jonathan Cox, Deputy Chief for CAL FIRE. I wear 3 hats in this county. I serve as a Deputy Chief for the state and also the Deputy Chief for San Mateo County Fire Department, which is all the areas in unincorporated county that are outside of a city or a fire district. I also serve as the Deputy Fire Chief for a Coastside Fire Protection District, which includes the city of Half Moon Bay. With that long title, I will just kind of give you a rundown. I was asked to give a presentation by Dawn regarding just fire preparedness in the county, where we're at, what we're looking at, kind of the state of the state when it comes to fire readiness here locally in the county. I'll give you the next slide. So just to start off with the statistics from last year, if we go to the next slide. If you remember, we came out of kind of the 5 worst fire seasons on record when we came out of 2017 really was the kickoff. We saw a pretty low amount of fire activity last year in comparison to the previous 5 years. The chart here does a pretty good job of showing both the acres burned as well as the structures lost across the state. A number of factors for why the fire season wasn't as intense as previous years. But that being said, we still had large activity across the state. The Caldor fire was probably the most shining example of just large damaging fires that occurred. But we don't take that as the new normal. We look at a kind of much more holistic timeline of fire activity and what the new normal is. And we really do still have a fire problem, not only across the state, but also in this county. Next slide. All right, and a good place to start last year is probably the Edgewood fire. If you remember, June 21st of last year, we had an abnormal day when it came to weather. We had 100-plus degree weather here in Redwood City. We had a fire break out near Edgewood Park, really the corner of 3 jurisdictions, city of Redwood City, the town of Woodside, as well as unincorporated San Mateo County. The fire ended up burning about 21 acres, mainly in Edgewood County Park, and involved a lot of resources. We did get a little bit lucky in the sense that although we had the high heat, we didn't have much wind on it. We didn't have that traditional coastal influence that usually puts some wind off the ridge line down into the bay side. It was a good test of our system in the sense that DEM was highly involved, the sheriffs obviously, as well as all the local jurisdictions. I know the city of Redwood City stood up a shelter. And kind of as lessons learned from the CZU complex, we were able to get evacuation alerts out quickly through DEM, get people to go to the sites that they need to go to get the information. The other thing that really helped us last year on the Edgewood fire is we had a large air attack on it. If you think back to the CZU fire in 2020 when we had 26 fires break out simultaneously across the county, the Edgewood fire, we had aircraft from Sacramento, Napa, Sonoma, Hollister, really able to keep this fire in check. As a result of the Edgewood fire, we did have an after-action meeting with all the jurisdictions who were involved, and a lot of good lessons learned when it came to communications, training, how we can do things better, and that culminated this year in some actual trainings between agencies here in the county. All right, with that all being said, kind of to set the context, the kind of fire problem that we have the last 5+ years that we've seen the increase in fire activity, you've obviously seen just the amount of funding and attention that wildfire has gotten across the state from both the state offices of OES as well as CAL FIRE. And that's resulted in a lot of new initiatives. And really, it's a multi-pronged approach. It's not only fuels treatment and vegetation management across the landscape, it's also building additional infrastructure to get more resources to these fires earlier. And then it's also updating codes and policy to make sure that where we build and how we actually build resilience into moving forward is put into place. What I have up here right now is the statewide map that zoomed in on San Mateo County. This CalMapper program is publicly available. You can see all the active vegetation management treatment that's going on across the county. This program is centralized in Sacramento. Any grant money that comes from CAL FIRE usually goes through a fire safe council. This reporting comes back to this location as well. So there is a dashboard that people can see that projects are going on across the county. Next slide, please. So for us locally, we really have 3 ways that we have been treating the vegetation here in the county. One of them is what's called the shaded fuel break, or just literally getting rid of the fuels, and that's the picture you see on the left there. That's trying to both preserve the ecosystem as well as reduce the impacts of fire. They are beneficial, but they are fairly labor intensive, and they require maintenance. So once you treat the landscape once, you usually have to come back additional times. They also don't account for large damaging fires. If you have a campfire that comes through with 50-mile-an-hour winds, a shaded fuel break does not do much because ember cast tends to go, a quarter mile, a mile ahead of it. The second treatment option there in the middle is pile burning. You may see, people just burning piles, and that's just to reduce the fuel load. It's just a general fuel load reduction. And then on the right, and probably the most beneficial, is reintroducing fire to the landscape here in across California. And kind of to set the context, we live in a Mediterranean climate. This landscape wants to burn. Kind of development in this state, the landscape had a fire return interval of anywhere from 30 to 80 years that any acre of land would burn across the state. Over the last 100 years, we've been really good at putting out fires. What that has done is that has interrupted the natural fire regime across the state. So that's why what we're seeing is a real big effort to get fire back on the landscape. Luckily, we have a fairly robust group within our organization here in the CAL FIRE CZU unit, and we actually were able to get fire on the landscape back in the San Francisco watershed last year for the first time in quite a few years. And we also have a number of projects going on in the planning stages. Mainly on the South Coast, Pomponio Ranch, Tomcat Ranch at the moment is the focus, as well as the mushroom farm down there. We will be doing a burn on the watershed again up at the Sheep Camp Trail off Highway 280 in the Vista, as well as the dam face. This is also relatively a difficult situation for us because once we get close to houses, we obviously get people who are very nervous about reintroducing fire in the landscape. So it does take a lot of public outreach and a lot of education to make people feel comfortable with bringing and reintroducing fire to the landscape locally. A couple other things to kind of think about, next slide please, is just what individuals can do themselves. And what I always come back to with vegetation management is really the responsibility of the property owner. So we work a lot with the large landowners in this county, SFPUC, state parks, Filoli, GGNRA over on the coast, as well as many of the jurisdictions in this room. And that includes down to the homeowner level. And a couple things that homeowners have available to them in this county in some of the most fire-prone areas is the neighborhood chipping program. That's a collaboration between RCD as well as the Fire Safe Council. And that just gives people the opportunity to, if they cut the vegetation from around their structure, that it will get chipped on site. That program has expanded over the last few years and something that we really encourage people in the community to engage in. In addition to fuels treatment, At the state level, there's a couple initiatives going on. One is the new Office of Wildfire Preparedness that is at the Sacramento level, and that's introducing new programs such as home hardening, and there's some home hardening pilot projects going on in 3 counties across the state right now. But what we're seeing is the new infrastructure we build, we can obviously build up to fire-resistant code. It's the existing infrastructure that we have, and that can be road widths, that can be the way that structures are built with the materials such as roofs and windows. So this is not a one-pronged approach that the state is taking. There's obviously the existing infrastructure that we're trying to address at the same time. Next slide. Locally, we have got a couple new pieces of equipment. On the left, you'll see there it's a new county masticator that's coming into play. This is a direct fund grant from CAL FIRE to the county, and on the right is a water trailer. This is just one of dozens of tools that are out there in the county right now, but it's just an example of the money that's coming from the state down to the local level to meet the needs of the projects that are identified here locally. And when we prioritize the projects, we really use 2 metrics. We use what's called the CWPP, which is a Community Wildfire Preparedness Plan, as well as the CZU Fire Plan. And those plans really guide the priorities for our vegetation management and how and where we're going to get them done. Where we have the most success is partnering with other agencies and with other landowners. If we want to put in a large shaded fuel break or do a large prescribed burn, it's a lot of collaboration and willingness with that landowner that has to be there before we can get involved, because obviously we don't own land, we just are there to prevent and extinguish fires. Next slide. As far as the response side of the house, we've been fortunate over the last 2 years to get a relatively large increase in staffing here in the CAL FIRE CZU unit. We got 1 of 13 additional fire engines that were introduced across the state. We've gotten additional staffing, almost adding what equates to almost a 3rd shift for our firefighting crews. And maybe most beneficial of all is we got funding. We are one of the counties that received funding to open an actual hand crew camp for actual firefighter hand crews. Our closest hand crews come out of Felton down in Santa Cruz County. This new program that's going to be at Glenwood Camp out in La Honda will actually house 2 fire crews. We'll be able to hire 80 firefighters, and it will give us that capacity locally to not only do the vegetation management work, but to also respond to wildfires. This matrix up here is just for representation. This is our state matrix of statewide resources that are available during the wildfire season. CAL FIRE is relatively lucky in the sense that we can draw from resources from any of the 21 units across the state. Next slide. In addition to the response side, we've also increased our capacity on our incident management teams. If you remember back to the CZU fire, a long, drawn-out, complex incident that takes several weeks, it requires an incident management team to come in and actually manage those 5,000 or 7,000 people that are there. Traditionally, our incident management teams were a 53-member team made up of individuals from throughout the state. The state increased that number by 14 positions, so now we have larger, more robust teams to come in and actually manage these large incidents. If we get a CZU-type fire again, we'll get a much larger incident management team that actually comes in and helps kind of manage locally the incident. A few tools that we have been lucky enough to get is TechnoSilva. The state put out an RFP for a piece of technology that would actually give us better intelligence about the probability of fire and when the fire breaks out, what was anticipated to happen. TechnoSilva is the tool that we now have. It's called Tactical Analyst. It's all of our chief officers have access to it. And as soon as the fire breaks out, we get a 3-hour forecast about what that fire will do based on the conditions, based on fuel moistures, based on the location, and all of the criteria that are in there. And this is just helping us to make better informed decisions out in the field to make sure that we are ordering the adequate resources and putting them in the correct locations. I always like to say on these models, you do have to balance a little bit the actual model with what's happening on the ground, because obviously they're not in complete alignment. But it gives us a really good tool for prioritizing incidents and seeing where our biggest risks are, especially for the units once they get at scene. One of the other tools that Tactical Analyst puts out for us is they give us wildfire forecast every week. So we get a weekly summary of, hey, what's the potential fire forecast for your local area? And that informs decisions for us locally about, do we need to staff extra crews and equipment? Do we need to pre-position resources? Are there things that we should be doing in preparation for the fire that may come through? Another piece of technology that's out there, actually flew on the Edgewood fire, is the Fire Intelligence Real-Time. It's a real-time intelligence platform. It's basically two Beechcraft aircraft, one based at Mather, one based down in Chino. And what they're able to do is they're able to come over your fire and give you a live feed of what your fire is doing and give you the acreage immediately. Super beneficial when you're on the ground as an incident commander and you can't actually see the head of the fire or you don't know where the potential spots are outside of the line. This program was incorporated into the state budget and is now on the state program between CAL FIRE and Cal OES. A very, very useful platform. Gives us that real-time intelligence, something that we hope to see grow. The only limiting factor is that there's only 2 of them, and they obviously have to refuel when they're on their cycle. But it's having lived through it last year on the Edgewood fire, pretty nice to get a perimeter within a few minutes of being on your fire and seeing what the fire is actually doing. Next slide. On the local government side, there's a new platform that's been updated called Scout. And Scout on the operations side is a real-time situational awareness tool for all local jurisdictions, so all fire agencies throughout the state to be on. This can give information about the latest fire perimeters, the fire apparatus locations, any maps, frequencies that may need to be there. This is all centralized through Cal OES, and it's just a resource to put everyone on one platform across the state to have and share situational awareness. That's being rolled out at the moment. It's kind of going in tandem with FIRIS, and we're still kind of breaking that edge through technology about what's possible and how we align all of our platforms when we get to large fires. Locally, we've also had quite a few alert wildfire cameras installed. I don't know if you've probably seen them on the news or touched them in yourself. They're publicly available cameras that you can go and look at, and they are there under the control of our emergency command center to actually look for fires and see if they can detect columns. The good news about these is they've actually gone to the next generation. They've started to integrate AI into it, so it can actually detect and notify and actually give some information a little bit more passively, so it's not as a system that you have to engage in, but you can receive from. Our 3 that we started with here in this county were at the 3 community colleges. That's expanded. We have really good coverage across this county with the alert wildfire system now. If you're interested, if a fire breaks out in your jurisdiction, I recommend going here first, just because it's somewhere you can go and actually get the camera view about what's going on. It's good for not only first responders to see what the column is doing, but it can also give a peace of mind to the community about whether the smoke column is increasing or dissipating or where that location might actually be.
Jonathan?
Yeah.
So is there a link or is there a website?
Yeah, so if you just Google Alert California, or it'll come up, and you have access to all the cameras across the state. Yeah, you can't move them, so you can just look at them. Yeah. Here locally, as I said, we've increased up to 13 fire engines, and when I say we, I'm talking with my CAL FIRE hat on for state resources, not for county fire or co-side. 13 fire engines across the unit, 4 now based here in San Mateo County, 1 in Belmont, 2 up in Skyline, and 1 down in Pescadero. We obviously have a Ben Lomond camp. We also have a camp now down in Monterey called Monterey Bay Crew 1. That's a 3 Cs program. And we also have just increased staffing from top to bottom within our organization, trying to get the resiliency in place to get ahead of the fire problem. You may see the new helicopter that flies if you're unfortunate enough to be near a fire this summer. We've replaced our entire fleet of helicopters from the old Hueys, the Vietnam-era Hueys. We now have the Sikorsky S-70I, which is a new platform for us. The good news for us here in San Mateo County is our helicopter comes out of Lexington Reservoir, their base at Alma there. They fly about 20% faster, so they'll get overhead quicker, larger tanks, bigger crews, and we have started to introduce night flying into the program as well. So we do have the capacity to fly at night, which is a fairly significant step for the pilots, as you can imagine how dangerous that is. a couple fire station replacements going on within the unit, as well as locally for probably most of you in here. We've also revisited all of our mutual threat zone agreements with the local jurisdictions. And what the mutual threat zone is Hillsborough is a great example. All of the areas that are up along 280 there, that's considered a mutual threat zone. So if a fire breaks out in there, the local fire agencies respond, but CAL FIRE automatically responds with a full response aircraft straight off the bat, even though it's in the local jurisdiction. Having those agreements in place before a fire breaks out makes a big difference. It gets the state resources to your jurisdiction without delay. If there's no requests, it's automatic. And those mutual threat zone agreements, they haven't been updated in a while. Chief Wilson's been working on those, and those are going to be county-wide now for all the jurisdictions and based on maps. We've also implemented implementing an updated communications plan between PSC here in the county and CAL FIRE's Felton Command Center. As you can imagine, when you have 50 fire resources responding, making sure all the tactical channels of communications are correct is a big deal. We have a training next week with public safety communication dispatchers and CAL FIRE dispatchers just to run through some scenarios to make sure that when someone calls 911 here, the right resources get to the right spot without delay. Okay. And then finally, we have just our annual agreement with GGNRA. We do have some federal land in this county, which is under GGNRA's control. And we have an operating agreement on their lands because they don't have fire resources in the county that will respond and extinguish those fires as if it was our lands. All right, next slide. Just a few things. This is a snapshot of Glenwood Camp. I mentioned that we have the camp project going on here. This is an old county building, county facility, county complex that CAL FIRE is going to be leasing. This will be home to 2 fire crews, 80 firefighters. When they are not fighting fires in the summertime, they will be doing vegetation management work in the wintertime. And that work is really coordinated through FireSafe, which a lot of the jurisdictions in here are a part of, and just gives us a big boost in our capacity here locally. As I said, we've never had hand crews in this county before. Some of the challenges that we have, though, it's interesting hearing the conversation about the storms this winter, not only for us on the response side, but we have a lot of infrastructure issues out in areas that are normally points of contact for us to get to fires. That is a couple of examples that we're facing on the screen right now. That engine on the right, this is down in Pescadero, Dearborn Park area. They were responding to an emergency, and it was during one of the atmospheric rivers, and that culvert failed on them. This is not uncommon for the conditions that we see out in the areas that are most kind of prone to fire at the moment. There's a lot of infrastructure work that needs to get done, and a lot of challenges for us to actually get into some of these areas at the moment. All right, so this year, this is just the statistics about where we're at. For 2023, if you look at the wildfires, we are below average, 1,600 wildfires so far. The 5-year average is about 2,500 for this time of year. We're well below the normal number of acres that are usually burning by this point in the year, and that's really just a result of how wet it's been, how cool it's been, and the fact that we really haven't seen those big heat events or wind events yet. So not to say these numbers can't change, but they are looking good for this season so far. We have been working locally based on the potential for this fire season to actually ensure that DEM, sheriff, fire are all in line about how the process works. The photos you see up here are actually some photos from the 3-day training we did between fire, law, and DEM in this county. Almost all of your jurisdictions, fire and law personnel were in attendance. This was really just a 3-hour session to go through the evacuation process. And this year we introduced the large animal rescue group to the program as well to make sure that we were accounting for large animals, as well as the Ag Pass program. So the new Ag Pass system that's coming out that ag producers will be able to get behind the fire lines to take care of crops that they may need to, or livestock. Well attended. We integrated a lot of the lessons learned from the CCU complex as well as the Edgewood fire. And more than anything, just a great opportunity for fire and law to meet and chat and build relationships outside of the emergency so that when it does happen, we're all on the same page. All right, so for this season, the best place, if anyone's interested in geeking out on this stuff, We get a lot of our intel from what's called the Northern California Geographical Coordination Center. We call it the GAC. The GAC is really the predictive services for us for Northern California. We're in the north, kind of the north ops area of California, meaning that when we request additional resources, it all goes to northern operations. They put out a monthly forecast about what they perceive the next 4 months of the fire season to be, and it's really good if you're interested in learning more about it. What they're saying right now is, and I won't read all of these to you, but just that, things are trending below normal at the moment across the state of California, and they have the potential to be below normal for the next few months. I will caveat that by saying, although our fuel moistures are moist and our reservoirs are full, we do have a lot of grass out there at the moment. And it's kind of a double-edged sword in the sense that we have water and we have moisture, but we also have a lot of seasonal grasses. And seasonal grasses dry out quickly, they ignite easily, and they spread quickly when they do catch fire. So kind of the sentiment that is really out there is when the fuels do cure, when we do get the heat and the wind, we will see fast-moving grass fires, and we may have the potential to see fires in areas that we wouldn't otherwise see them because they now have grass this season. So although it's not happened yet, the potential is high for the large grasses. The higher elevations, especially the Sierras and the national forests and parks, anticipated much below average fire activity just because there's a high likelihood that we'll see snow year-round in some of those higher peaks across the state. Next slide. This is just info if you're interested in looking at this website. If you want the best weather forecast you can get on any given day, it's on the Fire Weather webcast. They do a predictive services for Northern California, outstanding forecast. And if you're worried about wildfire at any point where you are, you can always view the site publicly. You can go to the next slide. There you go. So this is just a graph of kind of what the outlook looks like for the rest of the year. We're obviously in June. Green is good. This map, if you looked at it over the last 5 years, has been bright red every year at this time. We're looking at below normal fire activity all the way through to the August and September time. That's when they're really looking at getting back to some sort of normalcy when it comes to fire activity. That being said, this does not account for the anomalies, and that anomaly is heat and wind. And as we know, with all the large and damaging fires throughout Northern California over recent years, heat and wind have been the two factors that have really driven these fires. So we like to see the green, but by no means does it mean that we can't not have fires. Just a good example, this is up in the Redding area, just a visualization of what the grasses look like right now. More than anything, it's just the color of those grasses. We're still seeing green in the grass crop in areas that we would otherwise see very, very dry vegetation. That just indicates to us it's going to be a late season. It indicates to us our fuels aren't ready to burn yet, but the light grasses can cure very quickly. And that also comes down to the fuel moistures. This graph is really helpful for us because it tells us what's the likelihood that something's going to burn. This graph right here, the blue, is really what we look at. The blue is where we're at right now when it comes to fuel moisture. The gray is average, and the red is the kind of below average norm. So those storms obviously gave us a lot of fuel moisture. It's coming down. When we start to get to below that normal is when we start to get concerned on our fuel moisture side. When you start to get the drier fuels and some of the heat, that's when fire activity really starts to pick up. But kind of looking at the data right now, we're above average. And obviously, I couldn't speak without talking about the drought and kind of our water situation. The drought monitor is incredibly favorable for us right now after 10 years of well below average precipitation. Not only does that help us on the fuel moistures, but it just helps to fill our reservoirs and our creeks. When our helicopters get over scene and they're trying to grab water from the closest possible source, that a lot of times comes down to those natural reservoirs and locations where they can actually grab water from. So kind of a good thing all around. Snowpack on the right is still above 100% in the Sierras. Hopefully our risk of mass flooding is waning a little bit, but we've been more concerned about flooding and water flows recently than we have wildfire. And then finally, just on the weather outlook side, the two things that we can't really factor in is heat and precipitation. These two graphs are kind of the anomaly graphs, saying what's the likelihood that there's going to be higher temperatures in our area, or what are the likelihood there's going to be additional precipitation in our area. It looks favorable right now. September is really the first time that we're looking at potential above average temperatures across the state. The thing that also doesn't get included in this is just the monsoonal flow. If you remember back to 2020 in the CZU lightning complex, that was a result of monsoonal flow from down south of California. Those are always the wild cards that we can't predict for. So good news, but not no crystal ball by any means. All right, and then just wrapping it up, having said all that, this is a photo of a fire that took place a couple weeks ago. This is Highway 280, just below Belmont-San Carlos border right there. This burned just under 2 acres. I personally was very impressed that it actually burned that well. So although we're talking about the fact that we're in a much better place than we have been in the past, conditions are still out there for fire to break out. This is an example of it. Again, if the conditions align, if we do have the weather and we do have the wind, we could see those devastating fires. With that, my contact info, happy to chat or answer any questions if you have any. Thanks so much for being here. Yeah.
Janet Forgan. Janet, you can go ahead and ask your question.
I'm trying to unmute. There I am. Thanks. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak on this topic. Jonathan, that report was very comprehensive, and I truly apologize. I appreciate everything you said. Early on in your presentation, you made a comment about, and correct me if I'm misspeaking, that had to do with the Edgewood fire, that you had some potential evacuations. Was it the Edgewood fire? Or early on in your presentation, wherever the evacuations took place? My question is, did you have any evacuations that involved any of our residents who were mobility challenged or had special needs in that process? And if you did you have the ability to accommodate them? And if you didn't have that need, is there a plan in place for our disabled community members to have safe transportation to a facility or shelter when and if needed? And I am a member, so everyone knows, a member of the Commission on Disabilities, and I am doing a lot of research on how we include our residents with disabilities in our evacuation plans when it comes to transportation. So if you can help me with that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm happy to answer. On the evacuation side, wildfire evacuations, we make the recommendation, law enforcement executes the evacuation and actually implements it, and they usually work hand in hand with DEM. I can't speak specific to that. Probably a great question to take offline with DEM and the law enforcement agencies that were there. I do know a shelter was open, and I do know it is a challenge. On the county fire side and the Coastside Fire District, we've actually implemented something called Community Connect, which is an application that citizens can go in and put special instructions for their property onto, so that first responders can see property by property, does someone with a disability or someone have something at that location that we need to be made aware of. It is a challenge, and I think it was a huge learning on a lot of these large fires. Is some of our most vulnerable residents were the ones that were impacted kind of the most, disproportionate to the rest of the community. Great question. I'm happy to follow up with you, Janet, and connect you with the folks.
Question. Craig Taylor, Portola Valley. Do you have any input on the CAL FIRE hazard maps and when they're going to be ready?
Yes, good question. I actually have it in my notes. I didn't get to it. So that's a great question. The questions are related to the fire hazard severity zone maps. CAL FIRE is responsible for basically identifying the hazard across both the state responsibility area as well as the local responsibility area in the state. The state responsibility area maps, the draft maps, have been released. And those maps are most of the unincorporated areas outside of the city and the county. The local responsibility area maps are forthcoming. Once they get through the SRA process, they'll start the LRA process. And the reason that's important for most people in this room is that dictates fire code and building code. So if you have an area in your jurisdiction that gets deemed a high fire hazard severity zone, there are now additional requirements for how and where building can occur. It is forthcoming. I think there'll be a very robust rollout when it does get there. Right now, it's just on the state side.
And do you have a sense for when the LRA stuff is forthcoming? Because it seems like it's been forthcoming for like the last 9 months. So,
Yeah.
I mean, are we talking 3 months or are we talking about another 9 months? I mean, I'm not looking to pin you down to an exact delivery date, but, you know, we're obviously in Portola Valley, you know, one of the high fire risk areas.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to understand a little bit better when we might see these maps, because they're pretty critical for our planning.
Yeah, and I share the sentiment. They've been a long time coming. I think from what we've experienced so far, they're trying to refine the science perfectly for the SRA before they roll out the LRA maps. So I would be lying if I told you any sort of date on that. I would use the SRA map finalization as kind of an indicator that LRA is imminent.
Means they're starting on the LRAs, they've sort of gotten their science sort of tuned, and then they're gonna start the LRA process?
Yeah, so the SRA maps have gone out for review, I think 3 times. They're collecting that comment back right now before they finalize. So I do know as once the SRA maps are finalized, the LRA recommendations will come.
Thank you.
Other member comments or questions? I think we have a speaker online, Carlisle Young. Go ahead and unmute and speak.
Okay, you hear me now, right? Thank you.
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. Jonathan, I just want to thank you. You're such a great influence over on the coast, but I did go to the emergency council meeting back in January of 2020, before the CZU fire broke out, and met you, and you said that Don Horsley had given you some money to build up Zone Haven. To your credit, you got it done right before that fire. But in the meantime, I don't know if you can give us an example or a percentage of how many people in the county are actually signed up for it. Because I did find out that it's only really works through SMC Alert. And my friends who live, ironically, right near Edgewood Park, when they had the fire, both of their houses were in the Zone Haven evacuation zones. One of them was in unincorporated Redwood City or Emerald Hills, and the other one was in the unincorporated Woodside, just on the other side of Jefferson. I called them both. Neither one of them knew there was a fire and an evacuation in order. But while I was on the phone with one of them, down the driveway came the sheriff's office. So that's kind of it's great for the person who asked the question about how do you evacuate people that are old and seniors. But if they're not signed up, and the one couple that are in their 90s, they didn't have power that day, so their TVs weren't on either. They didn't know about the fire. What's the county doing to put out more information about how to sign up and how to make sure you know your zone? Because I don't know if I didn't even know just now about the Community Connect over on the coast. So I'm going to look that up pretty soon, make sure my address is in there. But what kind of outreach is there, or do you know the percentage of people within the county that still are not signed up with SMC alerts?
Yeah, thanks, Sid. That would be a great question for DEM. I can speak to the evacuation Zone Haven side, and one of the things we heard on the after action for the Edgewood repeatedly was more information more often, more information more often. Zone Haven, and Tony knows it better than I do, they're actually building in the functionality that you can actually push notifications out directly from the platform to everybody, regardless of whether they're signed up for SMC alerts or not. And that's the big push, is to send information to people who are not opted into a system, because I don't think the opt-in is, has very high enrollment numbers. So that functionality is coming. We see it, we know it, and we also recognize that although technology is an enabler, it is not the complete solution. So we still have to go with those boots on the ground and making sure that law enforcement and fire officers are going out to actually door to door to check on people as well. But thank you, Sid. Information well received.
All right, thank you. Okay, sorry.
As long as I've been on this committee, I've asked if we could have SMC alerts, not opt in, but people could opt out instead. So I'll keep asking for it and asking, and eventually it'll get done.
Other comments or questions?
Through the chair, this is not necessary for Jonathan. I think that there's a confusion regarding Zone Haven and the SMC alert. I think that we are encouraged as residents to type in our address on the Zone Haven platform in order to know which zone that we're in. And so that when SMC alert comes through and it has our zone numbers on it, we know that either we have to evacuate or we have to stay tuned and pack up to go. And I think that is in cooperation with the local police and the public works for them to also physically go check on those locations. So obviously, the public comment is of concern, but I also think that there's always going to be areas of residents who just don't have that connections with the SMC alert, and perhaps reaching out to the local church or local nonprofit will give people the incentive to be more inclined to sign up for the SMC alert, if not the redundancy of having the local nonprofit groups or church groups to double up on the communication part.
Yeah, 100%. I do know that with SMC alerts now, they're sending out a map link with the alert so that you can actually click on that link and look at the zones live. And the other part that we really stress to everyone in the community is, if you get that alert or you need to evacuate and you know neighbors or friends in the area that may have mobility or disabilities, put that on your plan, right, to go and check on them. Having been at the Tubbs fire, the Camp Fire, and seeing firsthand trying to move a lot of people out of a very impending danger, that neighbor helping neighbor, there's just not enough first responders in those initial moments to get to every single person. It's just incumbent upon those who are able to help out those who can.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And with that, is it possible when the alerts go out that there's something that's included, please check on your neighbors?
Yeah.
That could be included in
Yeah, that's a
the
good,
alert.
that's a really good idea.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? There being none, thank you, Chief Cox, for the extensive presentation, very thorough, very educational. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on to a very brief, I said very brief, director's report, item 8.
I'm here now, but I'll be gone tomorrow. So, all right. This was put together by John right there, because what I gave him was a piece of binder paper and some drawings on it, and he actually put this together for us. It's very good. It gives you some outline of good stuff. This is my last meeting. I just want to thank all of you very much. It's my 45th year of doing this kind of stuff. I love what I do, and I did what I loved. And so for me, it wasn't really a job. So I appreciate your patience, because we messed up a couple times, and I apologize to Supervisor on that. But thank you very much, and I think I was short enough. So that's it. Thank you.
I just want to thank you, Don, for listening to all my nagging. And
You're right.
I don't know about that, but thank you. And I just appreciate everything you've done. I feel like we've come a long way in a few short months, and it is a new department, as you always remind us, and hasn't been around all that long. So I think we're on track, and as you know, we're in the process of recruiting for a new director, and that should happen, I think, pretty shortly. But just know that everybody here appreciates your attention to all these matters, and appreciate you stepping in and taking charge and, being the director of DEM. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, sir.
Was that the end of your report?
It did, sir. You said short.
My goodness, very good, thank you. All right. Hard to believe that we don't have another meeting till September, but be that as it may. Moving on to item 9, members' report. Any member want to share information on any topic related to DEM?
I would just like to say, I love the booklet with the tabs. This looks very, very helpful, so thank you for the organization.
Through the chair, I do want to echo, Don, for your service, and you have always served with such urgency and with a foresight in terms of what should take down the road as a vision. So truly appreciate your dedication and your hard work.
And real quick, to the chair, is Don, and when we sat in some of us sat in the meeting, it has been about looking forward, starting something fresh and having it relevant. It hasn't been about you, it's about leaving it, making a difference along the way, leaving it better than you found it, and I believe you have. And so, thank you.
Thank you.
I just feel bad you're not going to be here for the new truck.
We can invite him back.
Right around the block on it one time,
We'll give you a ride in the new truck. Any other business for the good of the order? All right, appreciate everybody's attention and presence here, and thank you, Don, once again for the refreshments. I think it made a big difference, at least for me. And Adam, thank you for all the things that you do behind the scenes in between meetings. We do collectively appreciate your attention to this work. Any other?
Can we give him a hand?
Of course we can get it.